Hello, I'm Susan Rushton, and this is lifelong English major, and I'm doing this because for years I talked to people maybe once a year about books and writing, and then I finally thought, this is stupid. Why don't I just do this every month? And so this is my first year of doing this, and I'm thrilled. I think it's necessary. And before I introduce my guest, I want to share a book that I adore. This is The Wind in the Willows by, by Kenneth Grahame, that I have had for 50 years, perhaps. I know I read it when I was young, and then I listened to it while I was running for a while ago, and I want to share something with you. As I was running, I heard, "All this he saw for one moment, breathless and intense, vivid on the morning sky, and still as he looked, he lived, and still as he lived, he wondered." And I had to stop and go back and listen to that again and again. And then when I got home, I listened to it again, or I found it. It is just gorgeous, and it's a beautiful piece of writing. And that's one of the several reasons I love The Wind in the Willows. It's just gorgeous. And as a writer, we know that it takes time and thinking to write something like that, and elegance and love. So thank you, Mr. Grahame. Okay, my guest today is writer John Bowman. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. And John is a writer. He's a poet. He writes poems. And if you are interested in learning about him, I have his John.Bowman, Bowman 58, the two numbers, at gmail.com. John.Bowman58 @gmail.com. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Oh, good. Okay, now, you have been a writer for decades. What made you start?
Wow. Well, when I was in high school, I got interested in the school paper. I was a sports writer on the school paper, and I loved it.
Why?
Because I got to talk to a lot of people,
Yeah.
interview the athletes and the coaches and everybody, and that was the best part.
And everybody had different ways of doing things.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
And actually the writing was the tough part. Because I was such a procrastinator, and I'd be writing at the last minute, and
oh gosh, I don't know anybody who does that.
But I got to where I had a journalism career. I was in newspapers for nearly 40 years. First as a reporter, then as a columnist, then as an editor. So it was a wonderful career.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It's sad to me what happened to newspapers right about the time I left it. But
when did you leave it?
Let's see, that would have been about 25 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah, me too. And I'm sorry too.
Yeah.
And I would like. There are times when it was nice to have a thick bunch of paper in the newspaper, and so much of it was not words, but buy this. But at the same time, I was really aware that the reason there was so much advertising was that there was so many people reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, which and so it was good for everybody, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So where were you when you were involved with newspapers?
Well, I grew up in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana, but then went off to college in Franklin, Indiana, which is south of Indianapolis. And that's where I got my first newspaper job as a sports writer. And then it just progressed from there. I went from there to Kankakee, where most of my career was spent. Kankakee, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Was a sports writer and then a courthouse reporter, cop shop reporter, and did all those kind of things. And as I said,
You did everything that anybody needed to have done.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, it was the fun part was all the people I'd meet and get to interview, and so yeah, it was a joyful experience until the end, when newspapers started to die. Actually, yeah, that was sad.
Yeah. Okay. So you started as a writer and in newspapers, and have you taught writing?
I have. I've taught in schools. You know, I've gone into high schools and elementary schools and taught writing and taught poetry. And I've done a lot of workshops in poetry and some writing. But yeah, I enjoy teaching too.
Okay.
Yeah, I taught a media studies course at John F. Kennedy University in Orinda, California. That was really fun too.
And what age level?
These were mostly adults coming back to school to finish their BA. Mostly women who had started college, got married, had a family,
Yeah.
got away from it, and then decided at some point in their 40s, well, I think I'm going to finish my BA and then
Yes.
go back. So it was that age group.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced, as a person who has taught in college, to have an older people in your class, older people in the class where most of them are 18 to 22, and nervous, and if I ask a question, what are they going to think about me? If you're 40. They don't care. They want to know.
Exactly.
And if the 40 person asks a question and keeps asking questions, then that makes it, oh, I can do that. I was always thrilled to have older people in my
Yeah,
class.
me too.
Because it was really a helpful thing.
Yeah, actually, you raise a good point, because I learn from those people often from their questions. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I never thought of that before. So
Well, you were teaching.
yeah,
Being a teacher helps you be a teacher.
yes.
Helps you learn.
Learn
Yes.
what you need to know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what caught you regarding poetry?
Oh, yeah, I started writing poetry as a high school kid. I had a teacher by the name of Miss Tonkel who really got us all interested in poetry. And I wrote a lot of poetry then, but then I got married, raised a family, helped
You
raise a
were
family,
working.
and working all the time, and got away from it, and then got back to it, I'd say about 20 years ago, when I went to a poetry workshop in Berkeley. I was living in Oakland, and it was put on by a woman by the name of Kim Adonisio, who is a really great poet. And I got interested and started writing poetry again, and I've written a lot of it.
Have you published anything?
I have.
Why, yes.
I have a chapbook, this little chapbook, with several of my
So
poems.
close to that.
But
This could be the house I die in.
right.
Okay.
And this photograph was taken by my wife Valerie in San Francisco. But I've had poetry published in a lot of small publications. My stuff was won contest here and there. So I've had a fair amount of material published. Nothing in any great anthology that everybody knows about.
But you've had it in several places.
Yes, yeah.
And you are involved with a group?
Well, actually, the Gold Country Writers has a poetry part,
Okay.
poetry group, and
Yeah.
I attend that too,
Oh, good.
pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often?
Well, that meets every week at the Rose Room in City Hall,
Yeah.
and I make it about half the time, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
There's some good poets in there too. There are some good poets in Auburn. I mean, really good poets like Trish Casper Ross.
Who?
Trish Caspers Ross.
Yeah.
You've had her here probably.
Yeah.
And Bill O'Daly is a local poet. And then up the road, Molly Fisk in Grass Valley is a really outstanding poet. So yeah, this is a good area for poets.
Good.
Yeah.
What makes a good poet?
What makes a good poet? I think somebody who is willing to be vulnerable, show a little bit of themselves. Maybe it's subtle, but but it's there. They show a little bit of their heart, more than just their mind.
Okay.
I think that poetry is so important right now because it gives us hope. So much poetry gives us hope. And I think in a time when there's such division in the country, any poetry that gives us some hope. And encouragement is helpful to us. It keeps us from engaging in all this yelling at the TV and and kind of grounds us.
I don't remember yelling at the television. Yes, I do. Yes. Oh my God. Okay. So you have. So I'm moving away from this particular part to what I was talking before, that I shared a book that I just adored. So can you share with me a book you just adored?
Right. I read a lot, and I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction, but this is a book that I've had with me for I don't even know how many years. It's called Poetry of Presence, and it's just packed with great poetry, and I've used it a lot. My wife and I have taught some classes, and we refer to this a lot in many ways. And I wanted to share one thing with you,
Okay.
which is an example of what I'm talking about some hope. Pat Schneider is a woman who's passed away a couple years ago, but she founded something called Amherst Writers and Artists. And she has a poem in here called Instructions for the Journey. But I just want to read a couple of lines from that poem.
Read the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't look awfully long. Okay.
Instructions for the Journey by Pat Schneider. The self you leave behind is only a skin you've outgrown. Don't grieve for it. Look at the wet, raw, unfinished self, the one you are becoming. The world, too, sheds its skin. Politicians, cataclysms, ordinary days. It's easy to lose this tenderly unfolding moment. And this is the part I was going to share. Look for it as if it were the first green blade after a long winter. Listen for it as if it were the first clear tone in a place where dawn is heralded by bells. And if all else fails, wash your own dishes. Rinse them. Stand in your kitchen at your sink. Let cold water run between your fingers. Feel it. That to me, I've read that poem many, many times. I probably should have memorized it by now, but I just love it. That first green blade after the long winter. We lived in Iowa for a few years, and boy, that first green blade was like a miracle.
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how long ago was that written? Do you know?
That particular poem was written, I think she wrote that probably 15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. When things are always in boiling.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And do you have a book that of yours? Another book?
Yeah. My
have-
book, my
Yeah.
chapbook. This is my chapbook, which has, I think, 26 poems in it. This could be The House I Die In.
Okay. And I don't think you've read one of yours. Have you?
Maybe not. I can tell you one of mine. I mean, it's in this book, but
Please.
I can memorize it. It's
Okay.
about my wife Valerie. It's called Valerie. Valerie, you looking better than butter melting on Aunt Delilah's pancakes. You looking hotter than gravy pouring from a hot stove pan. You looking cooler than breeze squeezing through Venetian blinds. You looking sweeter than bee after a long trip down lilac. You looking smoother than snake dressed up in a silk tuxedo. You looking slicker than a slicker on a rain-time walker. You looking at me, baby? Oh, how I do hope I caught you looking at me. And fortunately,
How
that's
lucky she is.
that's been published in several places too.
Oh, that's
fun,
wonderful.
yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you. And you have another book there.
Well, I brought this book because it's one of the books I've read so far this year. I really like Ann Patchett.
Yes.
And
So hold it up.
I've read several of her books, and this one's called The Dutch House, which I had never even heard of. I had read Bel Canto and some of the better known ones, but this was really a good book. She was a Pulitzer Prize finalist with this book. And another author I've come to really appreciate this year is a guy named Richard Powers, who wrote Overstory. It's a big, thick book about about trees.
Okay.
And it's based loosely on people who work to save trees, but it's a fictional book. And then I read another book of his just recently called Bewilderment, which is about a father who's raising a son who has autism. So it's totally different from the trees book, but Richard Powers is just a marvelous author, and sometimes I'll read a line of his over and over and think, how in heck did he do that?
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Let's go back to poetry.
Okay.
What's the best part of writing poetry?
The best part is, the best part is, to me, having an idea, starting out with an idea on how you're going to construct a poem, and then surprise yourself by a line or two that you don't even know where it came from. I guess there is such a thing as a muse, although I don't quite understand who or what the muse is, but that's the best part.
It's in you.
It's in you, yeah. That's the best part for me, is when something just pops out of nowhere, something that I didn't plan to put on the paper, on the page, and then there it is. And you think, oh, now this is a poem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but there's something. What's the hardest part?
Yeah, the hardest part
Is waiting for the coming to come.
Yeah, exactly. Waiting for the inspiration, but I think the hardest part too is the editing, and the editing is where the poetry, at least for me, where it gets better. You know, to write something, set it aside, come back a few days later and look at it, and then start to edit it and look at every word and make sure every word really has some punch to it and some meaning. but that's hard work. The editing part is really hard work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you teach poetry?
I have, yeah, I've taught at several different levels. The most fun experience I ever had was at a library when we lived near Oakland. I was invited to come and teach some little kids poetry at a library, and they were all like first and second graders. And I went around the room and I said, well, show me, raise your hands and show me how many of you have written poetry. And almost all of them did. There were probably a dozen kids. And I said, well, like, how long have you written poetry? Which seemed like a dumb question as I was saying it, but this one little girl said, I've been writing poetry my whole life.
Yeah.
And I said, how old are you? And she said, 5. So it just cracked me up.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I mean, it's amazing to me how creative kids at that age can be. Yeah, that's
Are they
really fun.
also frustrated?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
You said you did poetry when you were a teenager.
Right.
What caught you there? What?
Well, again, I go back to Miss Tonko, who was one of my favorite teachers, and she encouraged us all to write a lot. And at my high school in Fort Wayne, Indiana, was a big old high school. It was 3 stories, and kind of in the middle of it, there was a pendulum that went through the around the stairways of all 3 stories, and that thing fascinated me. I used to stand and look at it a lot, and I decided to write a poem about it. And the poem was about how it was a metaphor. It likened the pendulum to life, that it just moved slowly, slowly. And it was more than that, it was like the tedium of life. I kind of pulled that all together. I don't know whatever happened to that poem. I don't have it anymore. But Miss
That sounds familiar.
Miss Tonko liked it, and she sent it into a publication called National Scholastic, which was a little newspaper that went around. And so it got published in that. But,
Oh, neat.
yeah.
How old were you?
Let's see, I was a junior in high school, so I was probably like 16 or 17,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And did you know lots of boys too who were?
I had a bunch of buddies who all liked to write. Not all of them, but several of them did. But my closest buddies were all guys who enjoyed writing. They wrote stories a lot. Only one of them wrote poetry, and he wasn't real dedicated to it. But yeah, again, I think all this group of guys were inspired by this one teacher who really told us writing was fun, and we believed her.
Good for her. That's.
And she introduced.
Sometimes it's right.
She introduced us to a poet who I'd never heard of before, by the name of Edna St. Vincent Millay, who wrote under the pseudonym of Nancy Boyd. And I think the first poem I memorized was called First Fig, and it's, let's see, my candle, you know this one?
Yeah.
My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light.
Oh gosh.
I just love that.
Yeah, me too.
And to think that I memorized that when I was about 16 and I've never forgotten.
You still have it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah.
You have taught youngsters.
Yeah.
I can imagine that they sometimes they just, oh, I can't. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I can't do this. How do you keep them going?
Well, that's a good question. I think I prompt them a lot by reading them good poetry, and I like to read them stuff that they can relate to, like Shel Silverstein poetry and stuff like that. And usually that will get them going. But if I'm in a room and I ask them to write something, I would say, let's just write for 10 minutes, which is a long time for them, you know.
Mhm.
And I'll just kind of walk around the room. If I see somebody really stuck, if they have a blank sheet of paper, that's one thing. But usually they have something, and I'll find something in that I like, and I'll say, well, why don't you take that and go on with it. Take that rabbit and have the rabbit do something. Oh, and so I just give them little prompts
Hide
like
or
that. Yeah.
run or,
Yeah,
or eat
yeah,
or
yeah.
pick up. What's this? Yeah. So you've told us a few of the writers you like. What are you reading now?
Well, let's see. I just finished. I just started a book called. It's something about. I forget that I should have brought it.
I don't.
It's about Earth, how Earth began. It's a non-fictional book written by a scientist about how it started with hydrogen and then it evolved into all this stuff. But I always have. The one thing about my reading is I usually have 2 or 3 books going at once, which doesn't make sense probably, but.
Oh well, we're readers.
Yeah. But some of the other poets I really like are Pablo Neruda and William O'Daly, who I mentioned earlier, who's a poet. He's translated several of Neruda's books from Spanish to English.
Yeah.
But I love Mary Oliver. I love her work.
Lots of people do. Lots of people.
And
I know.
Billy Collins is a
Yeah.
guy that I like. He's funny, and I love it when people include humor in their poetry. And a younger guy by the name of Kevin Young, who's an African American poet, and Sharon Olds. I love going to poetry readings too. Like we went to one time where there was Sharon Olds and Kevin Young and William S. Merwin all up there on the stage together, and that was really fun to hear their take on poetry. And that always inspires or motivates me to write some poetry when I hear others.
I imagine that you're not the only one.
Oh yeah, I bet I see a lot of people scribbling in their notebooks while the poetry's being read. Yeah.
So what would you tell a newcomer is the best thing to do about writing?
I would say read a lot. Read a lot of poetry, and read different somebody who's unfamiliar with poetry should read a lot of different poets.
Old and
new.
Yesterday.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And find a poet that they really like. I mean, some people really prefer rhyming poetry, and there are a lot of good rhyming poems. Although today, not so much. I mean, not many contemporary poets are writing in rhyme. But yeah, so read a lot of poetry. That'd be my best advice.
Read.
Yeah.
R-E-A-D.
Yeah.
Read. Yes. And the idea of first this and this and then the one that's underneath and the one that's behind you and yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, John Bowman, thank you very much for coming, and it's always a pleasure talking with you, and I'm glad we could do this today.
Well, thank you, Susan.
All right. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again.